On Saturday, November 9th, you can watch a live Notebook on Cities and Culture conversation at the New Urbanism Film Festival at Los Angeles' Acme Theater. The festival, which runs from November 7th to the 10th, moves the conversation about urban planning out of the textbook, beyond the council chambers, and into the movie theater. For more details on the full schedule, visit newurbanismfilmfestival.com. Season 4 of Notebook on Cities and Culture is brought to you by Daniel Murphy, Polar Inertia, a journal of nomadic and popular culture, online at polarinertia.com, and Medivate, a community and set of tools to help you build the kind of meditation practice you'd like to have, online at medivate.com. Your books before talking to you today, I was thinking one thing about mid-century Americana, which was, do we like it because it is a simultaneous point of great American sophistication and a great lack of American sophistication as well, high and low sophistication together? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It is. I mean, it's all over the place. It's all over the place. It does have its place in the realm of, we can talk about it in the realm of mass marketing. I mean, really, mass marketing had already been established by the 1950s, of course, with many products. However, in the 1950s, there was a cultural explosion. And the reason why that happened is because we had the means to have that cultural explosion. And the fire fed the fire, so as a result, the mid-century era is a time when there was a great amount of productivity, and the productivity brought stylistic change as well. So it's a big, fashion show of wild and wacky products done in so many style guides. So it's kind of, like I say, we kind of live in a theme park. We shop in theme parks too.
It is Notebook on Cities and Culture. I'm Colin Marshall, coming to you from Silver Lake, Los Angeles, California, right by the namesake body of water, by the way. Today I'm speaking with Charles Phoenix, author, showman, humorist, pop culture histotainer. He's an ambassador of Americana. He's the author of books like Southern California Land, Southern California in the 50s, Americana the Beautiful, and many more as well, books on the Pomona Valley and Vegas. He does these live slideshows as well, slides that other people have taken from this mid-century period. He's done them with tiki themes and holiday themes. He does a Disneyland tour of downtown. We'll talk about all this stuff. The mid-century period we mean, though. End of World War II until the moon landing, is that right?
Well, I take it actually into the 70s. It's kind of, the edges are blurry. The easy edges are the end of World War II in the United States was kind of the beginning of a cultural revolution, a new cultural revolution of really the middle class. That's the other thing that we kind of sometimes forget to talk about when we want to talk about the mid-century era and the stuff, the architecture, the style, blah, 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 what Americans did. We kind of forget to talk about, now I already lost my train of thought. I'm like spacing out.
What do we forget to talk about when we talk about the middle class?
Middle class.
Yes.
The middle class is really such an important topic when speaking about the mid-century era. Because it was that time the middle class was so empowered to be consumers that they drove the consumer, they became fire, eating up the fire of the production that was happening. So, that doesn't really make sense. But, we just all became cultural monsters during that time, and we haven't let it go since.
What was the mid-century middle class? What did that consist of?
I'm sorry, I said cultural monsters, but I like that. That's a good one. You know what I mean, though?
I do.
Because we became buying machines. We became consuming machines. And that was the time America did not invent mass production, nor did it invent mass consumption. Wait, what did I just say? They didn't. Mass production, mass consumption. Yeah, but we certainly perfected it.
Tell me what viscerally still appeals to people from the mid-century. You know, we've talked before going on, Mike, we talked about the optimism of the design, but people, Americans, even non-Americans, they respond in a visceral way to mid-century stuff, do they not? Food, places, businesses, advertisements.
Well, I think collectively, in large part, it's nostalgia. I don't particularly use the nostalgia word, but I mean, that's a huge piece of it. It's our lives. I mean, a large part of the buying public now is old enough. I mean, is the age that grew up in that time. I mean, we're not that far away from the mid-century. So we still have, a memory in it, for sure, a live memory in it. And nostalgia is a huge driver. But for the younger generation that did not grow up during that period, it's purely, I think, stylistic. I mean, I think that they see it, and they see the interesting, unique, wide array of style and design that happened during that period. And if they have an eye for it, they're really glomming onto it. But otherwise, I think there's, a lot of young people who have no idea what the style guide of the mid-century is.
When you're doing a live slideshow, you're showing these mid-century photographs. When it's someone who could not have lived anywhere near the mid-century period, and they're responding to something, what kind of things are they responding to that they see on screen? What visual elements really get at them that, they could have never have seen in person?
Well, I mean, what they're really responding to, I mean, I've been forced to have to learn this over, 16 years of doing these slideshows, showing other people's old Kodachrome slides, is the stories that I'm telling about them, and the fashion show rundown I'm giving the audience of what we see and how it fits in, what's important about it. I mean, I'm obviously only choosing images to share with an audience that have extraordinary, combination of elements or an extraordinary element of some sort, usually an extraordinary combination of elements, a rare combination of elements. I'm only showing you great things. So they're responding to that. They're responding to what I tell them about it and the humor that I'm bringing to it.
It's the curation and the storytelling. That's what they're responding to.
Yeah, I mean, early on when I started doing my retro slideshows, the audience tells you things. When you perform, you hear stuff. They review you to your face. And one of my favorite, the thing that really kind of turned a corner for me in the beginning of when I became a performer and started storytelling and stuff. Now, I don't make stuff up, but I kind of tell what I see. I speculate occasionally, but I guess that's making up a little bit. I try to tell the truth. Somebody said to me, we love the slides, but we love you loving the slides more. So it's really
enthusiasm.
I'm what they're really coming to see, and not the slides themselves. So that was a major turning point for me as a performer to realize, they're looking at me, really. Ultimately here, they're listening to me. So, I mean, that was kind of then I started to, anyway, you listen to your audience. You've got to.
Let's talk a little bit about your enthusiasm. Tell me about the time travel in a box you got from the first set of old slides you found.
Well, I'll never forget, I was in a thrift store in Whittier, California, or was it Pasadena? In my book, I think it says Pasadena. Actually, it might have been Whittier. Anyway, and I found not a big blue shoe box, a regular size shoe box back in the day when shoes came in lovely boxes, from back in the day when. And the box was marked Trip Across the United States, 1957. And I already loved vintage cars because I grew up on a used car lot. And when I was a little kid growing up on this used car lot in Ontario, California, my dad was a used car dealer. All the cars, well, not all, but a lot of them had big tail fins. So I was very fascinated by that motif as a child, and it never lost it. So then when I was, it all kind of evolved. I mean, what's leading up to the discovery of the slides is when I was 14, I was really bad at sports, and my mother said, I want you to try out for a musical production at the local community theater, because, you shouldn't really be laying in front of the television watching TV all day long. Because I was kind of a fat, sloppy teenager. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll go do that. I mean, I can probably sing a little. I know I can't dance because I'm totally uncoordinated, but I can sing, whatever, because I was in the school choir. So I went down to the community theater and I tried out for this production of Oklahoma, a classic American musical piece. And so they said, well, okay, you've got a good voice. you can be in the chorus. And I'm thinking to myself, the chorus? I thought they were going to cast me as the star of the show. But anyway, so they said, you're in the chorus. But they said, you have to have a cowboy shirt. And I'm like, I don't have a cowboy shirt. You know, I'm not from a Western family.
This is a BYO cowboy shirt situation.
It's a BYO cowboy shirt situation, exactly. So they said, you know what, it's okay you don't have a cowboy shirt. Just walk across the street to Leroy's Boys Home Thrift Store, where you will find the cowboy shirt you need to be in this show. So I walked across the street, I threw open the double doors of the former Buick showroom, now Leroy's Boys Home Thrift Store, and I took one step back and said to myself, I think I'm going to like it here. I had never been in a thrift store before. We were a shopping mall family. We were total, you know, the consumer family of the typical consumer family of the time. That meant we did not buy used clothing. But I found the thrift shop to be a wonderland. I found it to be a museum of merchandise. I found it to be a school of styles, and I also found it to be the perfect place for me as a 14-year-old to begin to study the underbelly of our mass consumerism culture.
Because you had many eras in that thrift store. You take a glance across it, you see 4, 5, 6, 7 identifiable time periods.
Well, time periods, not so much time periods. I wouldn't quantify it that way as much as styles guides. There's so many style guides working here. But yes, there's also time working as well. So, I mean, we're always looking to the layers of time, no matter where we go or you know, what we're looking at. But anyway, so I went in the thrift store and I was completely intrigued, and I knew that I was going to be an addict for thrift stores. So I grew up in high school going to thrift stores and buying vintage clothing and kind of experimenting with different style and stuff. And then finally, when I was 30, I was in a thrift store 20 years ago, and I found this little blue shoebox marked Trip Across the United States, 1957. And I had been buying in, you know, thrift shop, a lot of stuff. But finally, when I found this, I thought, okay, I looked at it and like everything around it went blurry except for that. And I picked it up, I took the lid off of it, and I held a couple of these Kodachrome slides up from 1957 of someone's trip across the United States. And I was completely mesmerized. I said, this is a treasure with my name on it. And I had no idea that little blue shoebox full of someone else's, a complete stranger's Kodachrome slides was going to change the course of my life, but it did. So immediately I realized when I got home and I looked at them, like, this is me. And not only that, I'm looking at the quality, the medium of Kodachrome is unbelievably luxurious for any subject to have ever been documented in.
These don't fade too bad. They're not at all seemingly.
They don't fade.
Right.
I mean, it's an incredible, luxurious medium. It's like motion picture film, practically.
Rich colors for a time of rich color, too.
Right. So Kodachrome came along at a perfect time when America really went pop colorful. You know, basically Kodachrome was invented in the 1930s, but mom and pop photographers didn't really get their hands on it until after World War II. So it was the ultimate photographic medium for any mom or pop during that period. So, and as a gift to this era now that we're living in currently, I mean, you're right, it doesn't fade. And, you know, I mean, unless it got wet or something got moldy or something weird like that. But I mean, it's held. It's, I mean, its color is held. It's every quality about it has held. So it's a fascinating thing. So I found these slides and then I began finding more and going to more thrift stores, and I started going to estate sales, and pretty soon I started to have an archive. And pretty soon I started, you know, inviting a few friends over and saying, you guys, like, I've been collecting all these slides, and here are some of my favorites. I want to show them to you. And I was wondering, you know, is it just me that's like, I mean, no, of course it's not. Other people are going to enjoy this too. So, and that night, after the show, you know, my friends were like saying, they're like, wow, these are great. And, you know, I had a projector and a screen, just like, you know, the old school, like classic. And one of them said they're at the California Map and Travel Center in West Los Angeles. They do a slideshow every Monday night. This is 1998. This is, you know, still we're in the era of slides, you know, projections. And so I went over there and I said, can I show on one of your Monday night programs other people's old vacation slides? And they're like, what? Are you kidding? Of course not. You know, tonight, we do things like the Galapagos and someone's trip to Thailand and, like that they just came back from. We're not showing old stuff. And I'm like, I think that you would enjoy it. No, I don't think so. I said, well, let me bring some back and show you. So I went back the next week and I showed the owner. I said, look, this is what I'm talking about. I had a couple of sleeves full of like these really epic shots. Right. And she's like, oh, you're right. I had no idea. Yes, definitely. So we set up a date and I set up, I had gone into a very fine photography gallery and I told, I was so proud of myself. I said, well, I collect Kodachrome slides to the woman who's the owner of the gallery and the curator. And she goes, gold Kodachrome slides, they don't mean a thing. And I'm like, oh, yes, they do. And she's like, well, they don't mean a thing unless you do something with them. Right. And I'm like, okay. You're right. That's an interesting point. So I thought, I'm going to do something with these. I'm going to do a show. So at that point, it was at that point that I said, we're going to do a tour of the United States. And I'm going to put together all these, the best of all these collections that I've collected so far. And this was already, 6 years into my collecting. And so I thought we're going to start backing out of the driveway in Southern California. And we're going to take a driving tour around the United States. And that's what this is going to be. And that was my first slideshow. I did it there on, I think it was January something, 1998. And a writer from the Los Angeles Times happened to be in the audience of 20 people. And she then came up to me after and said, I want to do a piece on this, on you and your collection, in the Los Angeles Times Sunday magazine. And so I said, okay. And then she said, but there's only one thing. In order for me to really do it, they're going to want me to say that there's another date coming up.
Oh, I see.
So I said, okay, fine. I called a travel store in Pasadena. I said, can I do it in your store? And they're like, yes. 350 people showed up. So I knew that I was onto something. And, a little box of Kodachrome slides from the 50s and 60s really kind of gave my life it nailed me down and let me kind of go from there.
When you first started going through a real volume of old slides, hundreds, thousands, and sifting out keepers, what kinds of things would be in a keeper? What would be a trait or two of a keeper?
Wow, that is such a good question. I love that question. Well, that's the $64,000 question.
There's no one thing.
There's no one thing. I mean, my criteria is simple. If I feel there is anything in this particular image that is going to service someone in the future to get information about the past, I hold on to it.
Information richness. That's
Information,
a key.
information. Yeah. I mean, it's like out of focus pictures of dirt, even if they're dated 50s or 60s out of focus pictures of dirt. Guess what? I have news for you. You know what? They're not that interesting. Out of focus pictures of dirt. We don't care.
Right.
And,
we still have dirt.
One of the ways that I kind of define my criteria of what would be interesting is knowing just 50 years before, even though we had photography 50 years before, like say at the turn of the century, we didn't have mass photography at that point. So I always look at, I say, I wish we had these photos from 50 years earlier so we could see the detail of that culture. Right. So if I have the luxury in my hand of holding, even if it's a minute little kind of a detail or something, I think it's interesting because I know we don't have that detail from even 50 years before. Does that make sense?
It does. And I'm thinking of some of the shots I've seen in your books, and it helps if there's a lot of people in it, group shots, but not all group shots are interesting as well at the same time. And I mean, let's get this straight for the listener as well. We talked about it off mic before, but at this point, you've seen so many of these mid-century shots. You know a 1960 from a 1961, right?
Well, okay, first of all, slides started to be dated. Kodachrome started dating, or Kodak started dating their Kodachrome slides when they processed them in August of 58. They started stamping the date. But so we do generally know the month and date they were at least processed. But, I'm not necessarily down to defining. We don't really need to define this is a 1961 slide versus this is a 1960 slide that often. Right. In what I've done with these slides, turning them into entertainment, I I realize that some of the time the exact date isn't that important. I do enjoy, I'm a numbers person, so I really do want to know the date of everything because it's time that is the ultimate, gives us the ultimate ability to judge, I feel. Like, for example, I mean, not to go off topic here, but earlier when we were talking about, you know, do you like such and such building that was just built? I don't want to even ask myself, do I like a brand new building? I mean, I'll get down there to look at it immediately, wherever it is, downtown or whatever. I mean, I like looking at new buildings, but I'm really interested in seeing how they age. So let's look at it in 10 years and see how did it influence other buildings in that 10 years? How did it physically hold up? You know, so I don't ever want to judge right away on a building, but now I lost my train of thought. Of course, you know I would.
I would imagine.
Where were we?
Well, following on that, I mean, I would imagine one thing you look for in a photo is not just that it evokes the time it was shot, like that's 1961, but that there's 1960 in it, that there's 1955 in it, 1950, 1940, that's all in the one photo.
Well,
Pelham says.
You know, when you look at a photo, it's really the best you can do with it is treating it like you're looking through a window. As when you look through a window, you don't see everything in the world. Sometimes when you look through a window, you only see a few things. Sometimes when you look into a slide, I like to look into slides, not at them. When you look into slides, in photography, I'm looking for pictures that I haven't seen before. You know, I'm not looking for the same old shot of, you know, the mom and the kids sitting around the Christmas tree. Well, actually, I am. But I'm looking for the most extraordinary examples. Like, for example, mom has on this wildly visual skirt, or the kids are all dressed up the same, or there's some really crazy stuffed animal on the side, or there's some, like, little girl's crazy set of kitchen appliances that are all pink and, you know, foot tall. Yes. You know, I'm looking for extreme things. I'm looking things that will interest us now. I'm not generally looking for what's the same as now, as I'm looking for what is different from now. I'm looking for everything. I look at everything in the picture, and I can only then choose to share it with an audience or publish it in a book if it has something to say. I mean, and if it doesn't have something to say, that doesn't mean it's not a good image. It just means that it doesn't suit the criteria for the particular medium that I'm looking to apply it to, such as a live show presentation or a publication, or nowadays Facebook, or, you know, I do a email list called Slide of the Week, where I, for 10 years, featured vintage slides and, you know, told a little story or whatever about them. But anyway, where were we? See how easily distracted I get.
It seems like some as well, some things in these photos, they say so much about the time that it would be hard to find a better example, say, than in a couple of your books. You have a shopping mall that was built after World War II, and it had tunnels below to hide the delivery trucks, and the tunnels could also be used as fallout shelters. I mean, is there anything more mid-century America than that?
Well, I mean, that speaks to us on several levels. When you talk about a shopping mall that has a hidden corridor for all deliveries, that is a luxury. That is a luxury. That becomes theatrical presentation. That's merchandising. We had not only we had the technology to do something like that, but we also had the money they wanted to spend the money to do that. We were such a rich society during that time. So yeah, we're talking about Eastland Shopping Center, built in West Covina in 1957. It was the first freeway side shopping center ever built in Southern California. That in of itself is merchandising right there, putting your marketplace next to a thoroughfare. But yes, it had a hidden, where the trucks came in to deliver to the stores, which, you know, yeah, that cost extra money to build that in. And then it also served as a fallout shelter for 1,000 people. They could stay there for 1 week.
Stocked with supplies, then, I would imagine. I mean, it's hard to envision today that getting off of the drawing board. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because it costs too much.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, we quite don't need hidden delivery from like our Targets and our Walmarts.
The kinds of extravagance, those say a lot themselves, right? Just not that it was such an extravagant time, but in the ways that it was extravagant.
Well, I mean, it was extravagant in that, I mean, it was the middle class were empowered. We were in an era where there were, I mean, we're still 1 foot in the old world, practically in the 1950s. So there's still this element of building things, making things, structuring things with a lot of traditional materials and traditional tools and stuff. So there's a lot of handcrafting. Yet at the same time, we're exploring this minimalist kind of outer space age, gleaming stainless steel and chrome kind of world as well. So, you know, like all eras, we have 1 foot in the old world and kind of 1 foot in the new world. But in the mid-century era of the United States, it really was, you know, it really showed up a lot in the built environment.
What makes Southern California so interesting for the Americana enthusiast?
Well, I mean, you know, there's so many reasons. You know, I mean, I don't want to be a Southern California snob. I mean, I grew up in Southern California, and, you know, as a child, I was ignorant in thinking that Southern California was totally superior to all places. And as a small child, I was sure of that because of the fact that we had Disneyland and nobody else did. I mean, that's just crazy. But then as I grew up, I had the privilege I've had the privilege of traveling all over the United States, and I've seen there are wonderful things. You know, there's something interesting around every corner, no matter where you go. But what makes Southern California? Well, I mean, you know, the reality of Southern California is you know, Southern California is kind of Hollywood at among its core definers is that Hollywood theatrical, you know, thing. So. It's like we didn't invent freeways in Southern California. We perfected freeways in Southern California. We did not invent the drive-in movie theater in Southern California. We perfected the drive-in movie theater here. We did not invent the fast food industry here. We perfected it. We did not invent shopping malls. Did I say that already?
Nope.
Shopping malls here. We didn't. We perfected them. We did not invent theme parks here either, but we perfected them. We didn't invent movies here either, but we perfected them. We didn't invent television here either, but we perfected it. You know, we didn't invent entertainment industry here either, but we perfected it. I mean, there's so many things, you know, or am I just being now a Southern California snob by saying that?
Well, these are all reasonable points, and it's also extremely reasonable that a little kid would believe that because of Disneyland, they did live in the best place in the world. And, you know, I mentioned you do the Disneyland tours of downtown Los Angeles premised on the fact that, or on the assumption that Southern California has not one but two Disneylands, one of which is downtown Los Angeles. And Disneyland comes up for you as a, I don't know if metaphor is the word, but as a guiding concept. You know, what is so useful about the idea of Disneyland talking about America?
Well, you know, I mean, since I grew up in Southern California, basically Southern California, when you grow up going to Disneyland from infancy, you're 2, you're 3, you're 4, you're 5. I mean, you probably, I mean, no, not probably, you for sure. I mean, I'll speak for myself. You know, when I was old enough to have the ability to figure this out, I can remember like going into Disneyland as I don't know how old I would have been, 3, 4, 5 years old or whatever, and going, okay, my brain is telling me right now that we go a lot of places. My mother, my dad, and my brother and I, we go a lot of places, but there's no place we go that is even remotely similar to this place. And there's no place we go that is just so highly done, you know, highly packaged. And you know what? I like this. And therefore, and everyone in our family is in such a good mood when we're here. And everyone, it's like, it's an even playing field. Like, we have a conversation, a family conversation. It's like, okay, what ride do you want to go on today? What ride do you want to go on? What ride do you want to go? Everybody's on the same playing field there. You know, everyone gets to agree. It's not like when you go home and like mom and dad are in charge. All of a sudden, when you go to Disneyland, we get some say. Like, you know, well, if we only have time to go on one more ride, you know, can we go on okay, yeah, why not? You know, it's weird. And even to this day with my extended family, it's like the only place we go it's the only family occasion where everyone's on the same playing field. Like, at Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner or 4th of July or whatever, it's like, the moms are kind of and the grandmas are kind of in charge of all the food, and,
Yes.
the dads and the guys are all, whatever. Everyone's kind of doing their own thing. But at Disneyland, it's this weird, like, thing where we're all together all day and we're all, like, in each other's kind of place and space. And it's really bonding. I mean, it has that power as well, which is weird, which is a power that people don't usually talk about as much. But I'm sorry, I'm like rambling about other things you want to talk about. I do a tour of downtown Los Angeles called the Disneyland Tour of Downtown Los Angeles. And one of the reasons why I called it the Disneyland Tour of Downtown Los Angeles is
What's
because...
the legality on that, by the way? Can you do that?
I think you can.
Anyway,
Disney
continue. I
hasn't
wonder.
told me no yet. But it's like...
They have the reputation for being legally aggressive.
They do, and I'm sure they have been with many parties, and if they took one look at mine, they'd realize why waste our time. I just thought that downtown Los Angeles offered a lot of themed environmental experiences, not terribly unlike Disneyland. I wanted to highlight these themed places that have a lot that had a lot of Southern California culture. That they fit into the pie of Southern California culture, like Alvera Street, Old Chinatown, Clifton's Cafeteria, which is now closed, but it was there for 75 years. It's coming back.
I look forward to the day, too.
I know, we all do. There's that, and then there's the Bob Baker Marionette Puppet Theater. I said that's our fantasy land of downtown. The Bob Baker Marionette Puppet Theater is still there. I've been doing this tour for almost 10 years, and I only do it like 2 or 3 or one time a year. I mean, I might do it again for the last time ever.
I've run across you doing it a couple times. Well, now you might do it for the last time ever. You may be retiring the downtown tour. Is that
well, nothing lasts forever. That's another one of my concepts.
Nothing should.
Nothing should last forever. Nothing can last forever. Nothing will last forever. Nothing lasts forever. I always say that about everything. Indeed. I mean, not in a negative way, just in a realistic way. I'm a realist. I really am. I mean,
you started doing these tours 10 years ago, so you began them in 2003, in an era when downtown Los Angeles was not at its nadir, but it was nothing like what it is today, where it's becoming one of the most popular areas of Los Angeles. At least to me, I've only lived in Los Angeles a couple of years. To me, when I arrived, downtown was on its way to becoming a center again. You have seen downtown at its worst as well. You've seen empty downtown, right?
Well, we could talk about every downtown in the United States. I mean, basically, we hardwired ourselves to build our downtowns up and then to build our suburbs up. And when we built our suburbs up in the 70s and in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, we really pulled our downtowns down and out. Now, we're obviously moving back into our towns in the United States. I mean, we need them. They're resources for us. And we were kind of living fat for such a long time by just like kind of letting them languish. And now they're valuable commodities. I mean, for living and for all kinds of things. I mean, basically in large part, they're being revitalized, our downtowns and downtown Los Angeles as well by its residential population moving in, as opposed to just like shoppers or something like that. But anyway, so yeah, downtown Los Angeles has evolved immensely, as has everything and everywhere.
It's an interesting thing for me, and probably for you, about Southern California as well. Southern California, I like the mid-century Americana here. The Buck Rogers cars, the legacy of some of the modern houses and the googie coffee shops and all that cool stuff. But I also like the downtown revival. I mean, I live in Koreatown now. I live on the subway line, which is unusual in Los Angeles. I mean, I like equally well the urbanism that is getting a resurgence. Are these two things incompatible? Do I like two things that can't go together?
You mean Los Angeles and riding a bicycle?
Well, I do ride a bike here. That's another point. We just saw some cyclists go by, so it was very thematically apt. But, I like the elements of dense urbanism that are in Los Angeles now. It's one of the reasons I came here, because those are coming back. But I like the old stuff. I like Pans also.
Well, you can have your cake and eat it too here.
Oh, good to know.
You can. This is the city where you can have your cake and eat it too. I know a lot of 20-somethings, and I believe you may be one of them, that does not own a car.
Right.
And they're like, well, I don't really want to own a car. And I was like, for me as a 50-year-old, it's shocking. From my generation, all we could do was wait to own a car.
Yes.
But the pendulum has swung, and there is a new kind of an urban kind of a core that's happening here that you can kind of almost get away without having to have a car. And that's because basically the main equation that to me that's made that happen for your generation is the fact that you work from home. Mm. And that's really the reason why you don't need a car. And because you live in a close enough, an area that's tight enough that you can actually get around either by, your bicycle or, least case scenario in Los Angeles, what do we call it? The metro?
Oh, yes. There's the trains and then there's the buses as well. So two systems that cover different territories. But metro.
It's so funny in Los Angeles, the attitude that we have, the snobbery that we have towards the public transportation. I mean, it's changing. It's really changing quickly. But, this is car culture here.
Right.
We are not a public transportation culture. Los Angeles isn't.
Do you think it's generational as well?
Well, it is generational because your generation is not rejecting the public transportation. You're embracing it as limited as it is. But you guys are being very resourceful, I find, with some of my 20-something friends. And you are literally moving to properties that are near a line.
Right.
And then when you need a car, you call up Zipcar or whatever it is, and you've got your car in 1 second. A, and B, if you're going on a trip to Joshua Tree over the weekend or whatever, you're like, A, someone has a car, or B, we'll just rent a darn car.
Right.
Whatev.
Yes. You find some solution in the environment around you. But let's talk about cars a bit because you have such a background with cars. We took a ride in your 1961 Bonneville earlier. Now we're in your Dodge Challenger, which is a new car, but it's styled, it's brought back retro styling from, you would say, the early 70s? What style, what aesthetic is brought back with this car?
This is what year is this? 2012 Dodge Challenger. Yeah, they introduced the Dodge Challenger into the Dodge line in 2008. It's a heritage design, not terribly unlike the Camaro is inspired by the original Camaro, which came out in 1967. The Mustang of today is virtually inspired by the original Mustang of 1965. The Challenger is inspired by the Challenger of 1970, a muscle car. And they even reissued some of the original colors. Like this one is orange. I think they call it Hemi orange, which Hemi refers to the hemispherical combustion, the heads of the combustion chamber or whatever. I'm not that into motor technology, but the hemispherical combustion chambers of the engine, isn't that right?
Yeah, the tops are hemispherical.
Right. Ooh. You're so good. That's so funny that you knew that. Anyway, I'm impressed. I love cars. I'm a car person. I mean, I'm constantly looking at the cars around me everywhere I go. I mean, they're ride vehicles.
Right.
Again, it kind of takes us in the direction of talking about how, the world, I mean, this is a little bit of a stretch, but in so many ways, I see the world we live in is like a theme park. Our cars are ride vehicles.
Right.
And everywhere we go, at least for me, I feel like every single place I go is like, it's a field trip. I'm going on a field trip.
Right.
Maybe you don't call it a field trip, call it a discovery tour or whatever. Even the grocery store is a discovery tour. I mean, I love marketplaces, shops. I mean, everywhere, every garden.
There's so much to see everywhere.
Yeah, there's so much to see everywhere.
Right.
And, everything is most everything somehow is dressed in some sort of a theme that harkens back to some strain of a culture, our culture. And I'm always trying to put the puzzle pieces of all that together.
Right.
I'm also looking through the layers of time. I want to know, what the time style guide is here. What era is this? What is this? What school of thought, this come frometh. I'm sorry, I never talk that way. I don't know what happened.
Well, since you look so closely at cars, I'll run this by you. I mean, one of the reasons I don't have a car is because I feel like in recent decades, so much of the joy got taken out of driving, something that should be a pleasure, something that should be, something that is not so crushingly utilitarian, such a chore. It's been made into a chore. So is eating, for that matter. We've taken the pleasure out of so many inherently pleasurable things, and you see it in some car design, don't you? You see sort of a weary people who just want to get things over with.
Well, you're right. You are right. We have done that in many ways. I mean, that's kind of negative, a negative way to live, to kind of take the joy out of stuff. I try to pump the joy into everything as much as I possibly can. I look for the joy. I look for the humor. And, part of the joy for me is the understanding of and the knowledge of and the putting the puzzle pieces together of from what did this come? And knowing that or researching that is really kind of, the joy. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And we talked off mic before. You had an observation I liked about the optimism of the mid-century design, the optimism of Americana at its height, the space age, about speed, about traveling far, about getting in the rocket, going to the moon, if you like, about fast service, getting things when you want them. When did we become from a people who loved speed to a people who, I guess, as I said before, just wanted to get things over with?
Speed is perceived as greed. And what happened was, we really got to this wild consumerism culture. It boiled up like mad in the 1950s. And then we started to get a little bit of the journalists and the observationalists, or whatever you call them, started to kind of notice what the counterculture was beginning to do. So then
in the late 60s?
I would say, by the mid 1960s, we started to see a little bit of that kind of perfect Americana suburbs, husband, wife, in a car, that sparkly, perfect, everything's going to be okay, everything is okay image kind of started to get a little bit of, a little bit of competition in its message. I think a lot of it, there were certain things that rattled the cage. And one was, even Elvis rattled the cage. With his wild, hip thrusting.
Sure.
That is kind of a overt, sexuality that kind of came out of this very push down era in that way. Also, then we get the assassination of Kennedy, which was really broke the cage. Right. And then all of a sudden we've got the Beatles and we've got the Rolling Stones. We've got this kind of English invasion, and they have they're much more progressive in their motif, in their look. And so then all of a sudden we start to breed a whole hippie culture, and then flower power, and all of this mass consumerism culture is killing us message. And then by the early 1970s, kind of the way that it was really interpreted by the mass market was, the consumer drivers is, it was interpreted into like ecology and the environment and all this kind of stuff. And more woodsy and anyway, does that make any sense?
It makes sense. And I wonder, you can look into any era. We, as a people, look into all eras and find what's worth preserving. The guys at Dodge looked into 1970, probably, and said, what about what we were doing then should we be doing in the 2010s as well? What was worth it in the early 70s? What's the most timeless part of that time? I feel like right now, we're regarding the 1970s as a particularly dreadful time in aesthetics, in culture. Do you think there is any truth at all to that, with all the leisure suits and whatnot?
Well, I don't think there are many people that are sitting around going, are the 70s, what stylistically from the 70s at all is worth discussing now? I can assure you, however, if one does dive into the well of what occurred stylistically in the 1970s, there's no question about the fact that they're going to be very happily delighted that there is a ton of great design that came out in the 70s.
Where is the best stuff in the 70s? What type of thing?
There's this, it's in every category. It's in every category. The thing is that we collectively as a society are so hardwired to both, we're really hardwired by the merchants, by the merchandisers of the world, the great merchants, to reject the past. because if we don't, we won't buy new. I mean, we can't, it's called planned obsolescence. I mean, and really, when we first learned about planned obsolescence was in, I believe it was General Motors that kind of the cat got out of the bag with them, that, we're changing the style of these cars, so you'll have to buy a new one because they're not really wearing out. The machine itself is great. It will go on, but the fashion is going to die, and it has to die because you have to go buy a new one to drive our machine.
Right.
So, it's we reject and we embrace the past at the same time. I mean, we reject it because we want to keep our economy moving. We embrace it because we want to save greatness, or what we perceive as greatness, or what we perceive as something so special that we want people in the future to see it. Now, talking about preservation these days, I mean, my whole trip on preservation, or my whole kind of chant or rant or whatever you want to call it is, and I feel like when I talk about preservation, which isn't really a subject that I talk about. I mean, I talk about preservation in a roundabout way. I don't usually say the P word. But since I did just now, I mean, what I want to tell people is, if you see a great building or an article of clothing or an artifact of any sort that you think is special and that you think should be saved, whether you have the power to do that or not, I say we're not really saving it for us or our friends or whatever. We are saving this for people in the future. And the reason why we are saving this for people in the future, whatever it is because they deserve to see it.
Oh, I see.
They deserve to see this.
The best of what we have now.
Right. I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say that my opinion matters now in 2013 to say this blank, whatever blank is. Let's say it's a vintage neon sign, handmade, one of a kind, that's been hanging on the side of a building or on top of a pole for 50 years or 60 or whatever. And it's amazing, and a lot of people have enjoyed it and think it's special. Well, guess what? People in the future deserve to see this. They are going to be happy that we saved this.
This is curation.
This is curation. This is curation. This is collecting. This is editing. In order to be a good collector, you have to be a great editor.
Tell me what is the curatorial element in one of the newer projects you've set out to do, which is creating elaborate new dishes made out of processed foods. We think of mid-century American dinners. We think of a lot of processed foods on the table. How did it come to you to be creative with those today?
Well, yes, I am a photo collector. I call myself a photo collector, a field tripper, and a food crafter. I was just born hardwired to want to be creative. And what I mean by that is I wanted to do things. I wanted to create things that nobody else created. I wanted to do things in my own way. Right. So I have certain, spots of talent here or there. I guess everyone does. And, I kind of gravitate towards what I feel I can do and do well, as opposed to what I feel I can't do and I can't do well. I walk away from those things, like surfing or whatever. Surfing. I mean, even though I feel I can surf in my dreams, and many of my peers can go surfing all the time, I can't really surf. I can surf in my dreams. I can get up on the board and everything. But in real life, I'm not good at that. So I gravitate towards the things that I feel I can be good at, and the things that I can do that will be noticed and therefore hopefully have some sort of a lasting effect, of whether it's 5 minutes or however long. But anyway, yeah, food crafting is something, I started seeing foods in vintage slides, foods on tables in these pictures, and I thought, I want to try to recreate that.
Jello molds, casseroles, that sort of whole thing?
Those are, it's kind of reinventing that comfort food thing, but I'm kind of doing it. I'm kind of taking these classic things and turning them into food crafts. Like, for example, in one of these vintage slides I found, there's a styrofoam cone wrapped with I almost said toilet paper. No,
yes.
Tinfoil, sorry. Yes. A styrofoam cone, 18 inches tall, wrapped with tinfoil,
yes.
and have multicolored toothpicks stuck all over it, each one wearing a savory bit. Some, the toothpicks they're plucking in a little cocktail weenie. So I saw it in a picture and I said, I want to recreate that. I'm going to call it the Astro Weenie Christmas Tree.
Yes.
And so I did that. And that kind of got me going in the kitchen to make these food crafts. I made a Jell-O Christmas tree using a traffic mold with lights in it. I put lights in the Jell-O. I plugged it in. They winked and they blinked. It was unbelievable. So I'm really trying to be creative. I'm really trying to do something that no one's ever done. And it just so happens that for me, food is a very easy medium. Sculpting meat. Just today on my Facebook, I posted a picture that I did called Easter. No, not Easter. I already did Easter meatloaf of lamb. I did. So this time I did Halloween meatloaf of rat.
Yes.
And, I love ground meat as a sculptural medium. I love Velveeta as a sculptural medium. Whatever you sculpt out of Velveeta, present it to your guests, put it in an electric skillet, plug it in, let it melt, and it's dip. It's cheese dip. Trust me, when they're drunk enough, they'll eat it. It's just, I don't know why. And cakes, cake mix, cakes, it's just something that is accessible to me. I kind of got inspired to do it because of my vintage slide collection, which, by the way, I didn't mention to you, I call the Slibrary, and I have a Slibrarian. But I love working with processed foods as a sculptural medium. I also like them edible. I'm also glad that collectively as a society, our food snobbery has kind of reversed. So therefore, the idea of eating hot dogs and cheese whiz and cake mix and all that somehow doesn't really phase the masses or otherwise, it seems.
Why did we love cheese whiz and Jell-O molds and casseroles so much in the 50s?
Well, because it was new and it was pushed down our throats, literally and figuratively. The companies that made those products advertised them beautifully and seductively, and we bought them and we got in the habit of eating them. And they were, it's colorful. It's like, it's fun food. And that's what I say. I'm into doing fun food, not fine food. I can qualify it that way and also qualify it by saying I put the kitsch in kitchen with my wacky food crafting creations, concoctions, recipes, whatever you call them.
Now, a current show you're doing is a Los Angeles architecture show. And listeners, you can get tickets for these shows. He does them around California and elsewhere. Tell me what are some of the places that, some of the structures, whatever you want to call them, that are most evocative to you that you cover in this show?
Well, one of the shows that I'm currently doing right now live on stage is called Architecture in Los Angeles. And this is the architecture in Los Angeles. Well, it actually should be called Architecture in Southern California. But what I'm trying to, and I hopefully succeeding in doing in this show, is showing the stuff that has not yet been discovered. The stuff that has not yet, the buildings that has not yet, and environments that has not yet been properly acknowledged, properly published, properly acknowledged. Stuff that's really important to our culture, such as the mid-century Googie style coffee shops, car washes, drive-in movie theaters, the fast food world, shopping malls, various theme parks are very misunderstood historically, I feel. And it goes back to the conversation we were having 10 minutes before, planned obsolescence. We are hardwired to reject what came before, so we'll buy new. And that's really, wait, now I lost my train of thought. There we go again. ADD.
I wonder how many of these places that you highlight in this show.
Oh, about the show. Sorry, yes. Go ahead.
How many of these places you highlight in the show are still around? How many can you still go to? What's the ratio of standing to gone forever?
That's such a great question. Thank you for asking that. I have tended in this show to show current images of vintage buildings as opposed to show vintage images of buildings that no longer stand. Right. For me, the lesson is we still have these great buildings. I do highlight here and there in several of the categories by showing a few vintage images of, just maybe for a little injection of humor or I never cry over spilt milk. So it's like, I can't believe they tore that down. I'll never do that. What's done is done, and nothing lasts forever. So let's enjoy these while we can. And if while we're enjoying these that I'm highlighting in the show, these donut stands, the big donut, the donut drive-through, the drive-through dairy, the Driftwood Dairy in El Monte, that's an extraordinary, simple space-age form follows function sculpture of a building. I want to highlight these, therefore more people might know of them, and therefore they might be more apt to be preserved, because people in the future deserve to enjoy them.
Right.
They will really like them.
Right. You think they are relevant to the future? They're perhaps not just it's one thing to appreciate. I like them as sites, as look at how people built things before, but they're also possibly, you think, actual places for the future, not just museum pieces.
Well, living museum pieces they could be. Yeah, living museums. I mean, I go to a lot of places and I think this is like a living museum. In fact, you mentioned that you're going to go to the airport tomorrow. On the way, you're going to go to Pan's Coffee Shop,
Yes.
which is a 1958 Googie style coffee shop. And it's considered to be the finest example of that in the world, of that particular style of restaurant. But, now I lost my train of thought again. I'm so bad.
Living museum?
A living
real
museum.
place?
It's like a living museum. It's like a living museum. So you were saying you were going to go to Pan's. I do consider that to be like the ultimate Googie style coffee shop on the planet at this time. I mean, it's still there, and it's like a living museum in a way, not in a bad way, in the best kind of way, because it's the original owners. They've barely remodeled anything. I mean, just lightly, and it's not a corporation. It's kind of a, it's homespun and family run. I love homespun and family run businesses. I'm very interested in that because of the rarity of it these days. Especially ones that have been around a long. I like places that have deep roots. I like places that when you walk in the door, you have to ask yourself, okay, like what decade are we in here? I like the time game. I like layers of time. I like driving through neighborhoods. There's no neighborhood that I don't enjoy driving through because I like to see different styles and different eras. I mean, obviously certain neighborhoods, no matter where you go in the world, are more interesting than others, of course. But, I do live by the rule. And when it comes to being out in the world, there's something interesting around every corner, no matter where you go.
And you're not, we emphasize, just looking for old stuff. You're looking for a multiplicity of time periods all represented, right?
I'm looking for everything. I'm looking at everything. I'm looking at everything. I'm looking at the plants. I'm looking at everything. I'm looking at the people. I'm looking at what they're wearing. I'm looking at the cars. I'm looking at everything. I mean, it's just like I'm highly, highly, highly visually... I think my visual skills have developed very highly. I'm not saying, they're highly developed because I'm probably dyslexic. I'm sure I'm dyslexic.
Your powers are shifted toward one side of the visual textual spectrum.
It is the difference between being visual and learning from pictures versus learning from reading is very simple for me. The equation is when you read, you have to discipline yourself to go from up to left, left to right, going down the whole time. When you look at a picture, when you look at an environment, whether you're looking in an image or a painting or the world around you through the window of your car or whatever, your eyes can dart around a million places. And if you have dyslexia, it doesn't matter. It serves you well because you can really, it's like typing 120 words a minute. You can type your 120 words a minute. You just type them in your eyes do the typing for you.
And driving
your
through,
brain is the page.
Right. And driving through Los Angeles, you need to take as much in as possible as well. It's like, people do zone out, but you shouldn't be. On many levels, you shouldn't be.
Well, when I'm driving around anywhere, no matter where I am, I'm constantly taking inventory of what we have. What do we have here?
Right.
What do we have here? What do we have here? That's all I'm doing. Everywhere I go, I'm taking inventory. When I go into someone's house, when I go into a business, you're looking around, you're going, what do we have? What's here? What's the story here? Ultimately, what are the artifacts? What's everything? But ultimately, what it really boils down to is what's the story? You really kind of, when you see interesting things, then you kind of want to know what the story is. And the more interesting it is, the more you want to know the story.
With the accumulation of asking yourself, what do we have here? Taking inventory over decades here in Southern California. What story do we find ourselves in the middle of now? What story are we living through in Los Angeles? Does it add up to a kind of change, a kind of story going on at this moment? Can you take a read on that now, or is it like, tell me in 10 years, ask me in 10 years, then I'll say what was going on?
No. You can like kind of tell what's happening this year that wasn't happening last year. That's the best you can do in saying what's happening at this moment right now. Does it matter now? It matters just in just convivial conversation that we all have with each other. Right. You talk about the weather, and you talk about I can't believe how many cranes are in downtown Los Angeles. Yes. I've never seen this many cranes in downtown Los Angeles building. I can't believe how many cranes are in Hollywood. I can't believe it. I've never seen that many cranes before. We're also talking about, how to conquer social media, and all of that subject. We're talking about, every year we're talking, the talk slightly changes. It's never the same twice. No 2 days are ever the same combination of elements. We evolve, and I'm interested in that evolution. And,
the social media thing, that's new in the grand scheme.
Yeah.
People can, as we said before recording, people can share their aesthetic fetishes.
Yes.
What do you notice about people's aesthetic fetishes when they scroll by on your Facebook newsfeed or you see them on the internet? What are they fetishizing? What's the range? What fascinates you about the aesthetics other people fixate upon?
What I think I notice more than anything is not necessarily the immense and vast and infinite variety of subjectry that we are subject to when surfing around the image world online. What I think I'm most looking for is not the subjects, but how it's presented. Like, I can't believe they would put that photo on and everything is in shadow.
Right.
It's like,
right.
be a good curator of what you're actually posting.
Right.
Don't post your subject in complete shadow. I'm looking for great imagery, of any subject. When you're surfing around, you look for the really strong subjects. So I say, this is theater. Posting an image online, however you're doing it on your Facebook or social media or whatever, it is theater. It's visual entertainment. So, caption it well and expose it well. And if it needs a little shadow and highlighting, do it, darn it.
Right. People are still learning then, in large part. They're learning those curatorial skills they need. We both witnessed the internet as we know it come into being. So we didn't grow up, we weren't born into this world, but my friends who were having kids, their kids are born into this world. They probably won't need to learn the curatorial skills the way we would need to learn them, right?
Well, no, that's not true. Some people are not hardwired to, to look at a visual, image and say, that needs to be, they need to do a little photoshopping on that.
They at least instinctively know that it needs something, even if they can't do it.
It's funny, like on Instagram, how you get to me, they all look the same. It's so weird. The brown tint, the white tint, the black tint, the whatever tint, the dull tint. I don't like any of that. I want images to look as clear and inviting and as fresh and as possible. And oftentimes when I've done projects with, other organizations and they want to include some of my vintage slides, they always want to distress the image. Oh. And I'm like, please do not represent this as though it has been somewhat destroyed or somewhat ruined by dust and scratches. Yeah, don't imply that on this because that's not what this is about. This isn't about the deterioration of this.
It's more, I feel like it's more unreal in a good way to see old reality as clear as possible. When a photograph is very, very high resolution, very clear from a previous era that I never saw, you really feel like, wow, that's so real. It's unreal. That time existed.
Well, yeah. When I look at an image, no matter what era of that I'm looking at, I want to see detail because that's what that's something that helps us to learn about the era. So if it's blurry or out of focus or whatever, you can't really see it that well. Right. I'm looking for information in imagery. As much as I'm looking for art and imagery and the type of photography that I collect, which is amateur mom and pop Kodachrome from the 50s and 60s, great photography is purely accidental. Most mom and pops did not look at the how to take a picture book, and it's probably just as well. But a lot of the photography is, it's when it's great, it's what I call accidental greatness.
And what accidental greatness comes from the photography today we take, when we're sharing our aesthetic fetishes come from devices like this, the iPhone that I hold in my hand. And I wonder less about the photos people take with this than the design of it itself. We've spoken about the optimism of Americana design of the mid-century. What optimism do you see in a design like this, like the iPhone?
What optimism? Well, I mean, the design is just simple, fat credit card kind of design. I mean, it's just aesthetically, there's nothing unpleasing about it, I wouldn't say. I have no problem with it. What I love about the iPhone is, 1 second after I got mine, I'm not like that techie savvy guy. I'm not that technical. I'm more visual and crafty. But the technical, what goes on in the underpinnings of these machines that we have now is fascinating and incredible. But I don't know how to fix it all and do it all. But the minute I got my iPhone in 2008, 1 second after, my friend who said, no, you're getting an iPhone now. You need a new phone. We're getting an iPhone now. Let's go. I have, my friends have gotten me into I went from PC to Mac only because, several of my friends are had a little invention. They're we really like you a lot and you're really a cool guy. But if you don't get a Mac, we will not speak to anymore. Oh, so we like you so much. We're all going to take you by the arm right now to the Mac store, and we're going to hold your hand while you get it. And then they take me, and then when we get it, they bring me home, and they go, okay, so this is how you do it. You turn it on right here, and this and this and that. And so, figure it out. So, okay, then you figure it out. But then I got an iPhone, and I'm like, wait a minute. I'm sitting here waiting for my ride at Denver International. I'm answering all my email. This is genius. Yes. This is brilliant. This is revolutionary.
This is Buck Rogers.
This is a car. This is an airplane. This is a rocket ship to Mars. This is everything great. This is every wild advancement ever, all rolled into 1 times 150.
This is speed.
This is speed.
This is reach. Moreover, this is faraway lands.
This is crack.
I guess addiction. It does come down to the best design stuff. It's always addictive, isn't it?
Yeah, to some people. We are compulsive. We are hardwired to be compulsive, I think, and habitual. Us people, we're very habitual, I think.
The best we can do sometimes is to share our compulsions in an exciting way, you think?
Well, just share them, and if it's exciting, your audience will tell you whether it's exciting or not. Let your audience be the judge of that. I think in theater and in presentation, whether you're a professor or you're an actor or you're whatever, or you're a mom serving or a dad serving a dinner to your family, presentation is something. When I'm with, for example, the kids in my family, when I'm with them, I'm into total presentation of everything we're going to do.
Right.
We're totally into presentation of everything we're going to do just because it leads this anticipation. Anticipation is something that we've kind of I feel like we need a little more anticipation in things, and anticipation is theatrical. When I'm with the kids in my family, I'm always kind of whatever we're going to do, I drag it out a little bit. So the anticipation of it becomes part of it. And, sometimes I'm so busy as an adult, I forget to anticipate the joy of things because I'm so busy working on things that I'm working on right now. Next week I'm going to go to a concert. Well, I'm not even anticipating it because I'm not even thinking of it because I'm not there yet.
Right.
But, I feel like I need to anticipate more. I think that we went off into a tangent. It's not that interesting.
It is, because, listeners, you can see Charles Phoenix's shows. You can be drawn into the anticipation of what he's going to show you and the excitement of what he does show you. You can read his books. You can watch his test kitchen videos. You can see his mid-century food creations. I've been speaking once again to author, humorist, showman, food crafter, ambassador of Americana, Charles Phoenix, here in Silver Lake in his retro-styled, heritage style. Heritage design, Dodge Challenger. Charles, thanks so much.
Thank you, Colin. A pleasure.
This has been Notebook on Cities and Culture. I've been Colin Marshall. You can keep up with everything I'm doing at colinmarshall.org and all of the details on the cultural creators, internationalists, and observers of the urban scene on the show. Thanks. Special thanks to everyone who backed Season 4 on Kickstarter, including Joel Neville Anderson, Daniel Levin Becker, Paige Calvert, Commander Manvark, Jonathan Crow, John Cunningham, David Dawes, James DeVito, Tim Dobbs, Paul Doyle, Jake Elliott, Kevin Emmett, Lawrence English, Jonathan Filbert, Andrew Philippone Jr., Michael Fransky, John French, Themis Douglas Eucrucius, Will Graham, Umberto Grant, Samuel Hansen, David Hayes, Jeff Hillenbrand, Mark Hines, Andrew Johnstone, Tadeusz Andrzej Kodlubowski, Peter Kavanaugh, Ted Kane, Andy Cooney, Evan Landman, Alfred Lee, James Maloney, Sean McDonald, Alberto Bruzos Moro, Jason Miller, Rob Montz, Daniel Murphy, Richard Nash, Aidan Nullman, Patrick O'Flaherty, Danny Olson, Michael O'Regan, Ian Blosker, Christopher Porter, MJ Pritchett, Piers Rippey, Rob Schultz, Todd Shimoda, Cam Smith, Deborah Smith, Adam Sutherland, Maureen Kincaid Speller, Anna Traher, Thomas Interberger, Matt Warren, Nick Weigelt, Dion Wolf, Cynthia Yang, and Wayne Wright.